It seems that it was becoming a standard for Sims 2 players to wait a 6-month period before their next expansion pack came out, and Nightlife was no different, releasing in September of 2005. Up until now, all our Sims knew how to do was work and go to school and pursue a higher education. And now it was time for our Sims to get out and have a night on the town. Enter Nightlife, the expansion pack that looked to answer that and more. For those that don't already know, my name is Michael, and welcome to Sovereign Gaming in Life Sims, the YouTube channel where I build worlds, lots, and share my thoughts on video games in the life simulation gaming space. Like I did with my other previous reviews, I will be looking at the following criteria and scoring it out of 10 based on my opinion and playing experience. These criteria categories include its concept, innovation, gameplay features, impact on the current franchise, in this case it's The Sims 2, and of course impact on future Sims franchises. Based on those scores, I'm going to throw each of these games and expansion packs on a tier list that I have created at the end of the video, so stick around for that. And today we are going to cover The Sims 2 Nightlife expansion pack. This is an expansion pack that is a personal favorite of mine, and I actually think it delivers a lot in its downtown themed gameplay and all of that. So with all of that said, let's begin by talking about Nightlife's concept. Up until this point, there was a lot of fun being missed by Simmers everywhere. Simmers could play through full lives of their Sims, from babies to adults to elders to death, and they could send them to university. But there was a sense of fun being missed, and this is what The Sims 2 Nightlife expansion pack looked to expand on. Nightlife's concept was pretty much a recycled hot date expansion pack reinterpreted for The Sims 2's base game mechanics. Now there's nothing wrong with that per se, so long as the execution on the concept is done well. I mean, just look at Pets and Seasons expansion packs that get reinterpreted all the time with nearly every franchise. Of course, like, their quality varies with each franchise's installment, but those are reviews for another time. The Nightlife concept, much like nearly every expansion pack in the Sims 2 franchise, uses the hot date formula, which involves introducing a sub-neighborhood that's separated by a loading screen. This formula, like I just described, would be the bread and butter of the Sims 2 franchise. Whether the loading screen is worth it to load through or not is certainly something that I address in the gameplay section of this review, and I will discuss it really soon. Anyways, back to the concept. Nightlife honestly offered nearly everything one could wish for in an urban expansion pack, including a new dating minigame, shops, restaurants, nightclubs, 2 new aspirations being pleasure and grilled cheese Sims, vampires, cars, and more. Although The Sims Nightlife's concept was solid, I also think that by the end of the Sims 2 franchise, they kind of needed to revisit this concept again, because the Sims 2 Apartment Life came out, and in my opinion, the Nightlife theme was used almost prematurely when it could have also included apartment living, which would have made more sense for the concept that was being delivered here. Like, it would make more sense to have apartment living features within the Nightlife expansion pack than on its own standalone expansion pack. Now, don't get me wrong, the Apartment Life expansion pack was executed really well in terms of its gameplay, but that's for a future review. Now, when it comes to Nightlife, I can give The Sims 2 Nightlife an 8 out of 10 on its concept, because I felt like players were given a lot within a single expansion pack. It's just the fact that Apartment Life exists within The Sims 2 franchise that knocks it down some points, since apartment living should have honestly been included in this expansion pack because it would make more sense conceptually speaking. I'll discuss more on Apartment Life when I get to that review, since I really wasn't crazy about Apartment Life's concept in of itself, but it really delivered on its gameplay. Anyways, that's for a future review way down the road. But when it comes to the Nightlife expansion pack itself, I do have to question, like, were we really given something new, or was it just a recycled hot date? Well, let's discuss that in the next category, which is innovation. The Sims 2 Nightlife brought a lot of new features into the franchise, namely cars and restaurants. I mean, The Sims 4 could never. Now that I'm done being petty, I need to say that Nightlife brought a lot of new features that Simmers were asking for. Firstly, it gave Simmers fully functioning restaurants, next it gave them cars, and now that the obvious is out of the way, The Sims 2 Nightlife gave Simmers something never seen before in the Sims franchises, and that was the dating minigame and group outing minigames. I actually enjoyed both of these minigames, and they added in unique memories as well if I remember correctly. And the best part is, they didn't force them on you per se unless you specifically said to go on an outing or on a date. Now, The Sims 2 Nightlife, which is essentially a recycled hot date, added onto hot dates ideas and brought urban style gameplay into modern times, being 2005 at the time. Regardless, I think that The Sims 2 Nightlife breathed a lot of fun in the franchise and helped Simmers to break out of their playing patterns by fleshing out single living aspects and such. I think it was smart that Nightlife decided not to reinvent the wheel and decided to take the approach with adding onto the concepts of The Sims Hot Date, such as adding in nightclubs and the dating minigame, to also add in turn-ons and turn-offs, and so much more within Nightlife. And so for that, it earns itself a 10 out of 10 in the innovation category for me, since it really added in new gameplay aspects to an old idea. Now, let's talk about the actual execution of the gameplay. Okay, so I don't recall there being any major glitches at the time of Nightlife's release, so feel free to comment below if that was what you had experienced at the time of its release. And trust me, if there's something that I'll remember, it would be a gnarly, game-breaking glitch that I personally experienced. With that said, I thought that the way they did vehicles in the game was fine. I don't think that they were perfect per se, but they were rather added in as fan service since they fundamentally functioned exactly the same as calling a taxi. Sure, there were a couple of interactions you could do in the car, such as woohooing in them or whatnot, but that was really about it. This is the point in the franchise where we do have to get a little more picky on the gameplay features introduced in an expansion pack. And when I look specifically at the pleasure aspiration, I can safely say that it didn't age well for the rest of the franchise. The concept of the pleasure aspiration being introduced in Nightlife was fine. I can get on board with Sims living life just for the fun of it. But most of the wants that rolled up for pleasure sims revolved around them going out and bowling or on dates. And this wouldn't be a problem except that players need to traverse through a loading screen in order to get them to do those activities. So it's a lot of loading time if you want to play your pleasure sims to live their best lives. And I felt that was an oversight. The restaurants, nightclubs, and clothing shops were definitely the highlights of the Nightlife expansion pack since they functioned perfectly in my opinion. The fact that these lots were separated by a loading screen meant that EA programmed into the lots likelihoods that a certain number of Sims would spawn, including Mrs. Crumplebottom herself. In other words, the lots didn't feel as empty as future iterations of the game, but I will again talk about that sometime in the future. I feel like the gameplay in The Sims 2 Nightlife ultimately delivered on the vision and the concept. I'm going to mark it high, but I'm going to take a couple of points off due to the short-sightedness of the pleasure aspiration, since I feel like the pleasure aspiration was more tedious to play than fun to play with. This brings The Sims 2 Nightlife to an 8 out of 10 on the gameplay. So now let's shift gears and talk about how Nightlife impacts the rest of the franchise. When looking at what's to come in the rest of the Sims 2 franchise, I think that players would feel like something is missing had they chosen not to purchase The Sims 2 Nightlife. If urban playing wasn't a player's cup of tea, they would likely want the ability to at least drive in their game with the cars that Nightlife added. As much as Simmers want vehicular driving in their worlds, when it comes to the Sims 2 context, I really don't think that driving is all that much different than just calling a taxi, as either way you're facing a loading screen. But I've already discussed that. I'm just repeating it again here to point out that driving itself doesn't really affect the player's experience playing the rest of the franchise. While still applying a critical eye, fundamentally, buying clothes was nearly no different than just planning your outfit at the wardrobe, so that kind of eliminates the need to shop for clothes out of being a necessary gameplay function that players must have. However, it is the restaurant gameplay that would have players entertained throughout the entirety of the Sims 2 franchise, since you could pretty much set up a restaurant in any neighborhood really, and players quite frankly just enjoy restaurant gameplay since The Sims Hot Date, which The Sims 2 Nightlife models itself after. With all that said, I think that Nightlife's influence on the rest of the franchise deserves a 7 out of 10, since some parts of its gameplay features helped keep players entertained throughout the entirety of the franchise, and other features appealed to Simmers who enjoyed urban gameplay, and then there were even other features that I would say weren't like must-haves, like they were just nice to have, such as the car driving. Like, I get that some players think that those are must-haves, but fundamentally I felt like they functioned just like taxis anyways. So yeah, 7 out of 10 stands in my opinion. And now let's talk about Nightlife's impact on future franchises. The Sims 2 Nightlife showed everyone that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to deliver a good expansion pack. Fundamentally, there is really nothing different from Hot Date and Nightlife. It's just that Nightlife took it a step further, which is something that EA would try to repeat unsuccessfully in some regards, but not here. Instead, Nightlife really adds on to the features that Hot Date was purporting to have, and really took the Hot Date concept, the gameplay, and added it into the Sims 2 franchise as an interpretation with its own game mechanics there. It was really well done in my opinion. As a game that serves as one of the key pillars of Life Simulation franchise expansion packs, which is urban gameplay in my opinion, I felt that Nightlife delivered on the urban gameplay the best out of all of them, including like Sims 3 and Sims 4. The outing and dating mini-games would be revisited in future franchises. Mini-games that I actually think are quite refreshing, if I am going to be completely honest with you guys. I enjoyed them, but I never went out of my way to play them, even in future franchises, but they were definitely nice to have, and I absolutely appreciated them being there to begin with. The Sims 2 Nightlife also gave us cars, and even though I don't think they function fundamentally different from taxis in the Sims 2 franchise, cars would forever be a gameplay feature requested by players and replicated in The Sims 3. In my opinion, The Sims 2 Nightlife raised the bar when it came to what players can expect from an urban-based expansion pack. Nightlife raised players' expectations by delivering on new community lots like nightclubs, introduced the dating and outing mini games, added a chemistry system based on turn-ons and turn-offs, and it also delivered gameplay features that players wanted, like restaurants. How this impacts the future franchises is that The Sims 2 Nightlife unfortunately remains the best interpretation of urban gameplay in my opinion, even though I don't think it's perfect in of itself, and that's okay. However, in this section, I will give The Sims 2 Nightlife a 10 out of 10 on its impact on future franchises, as it goes to show that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to deliver something great. When looking at my tier list and adding up the score, the second expansion pack in The Sims 2 franchise is getting a 43 out of 50, putting it in the great category. I agree with this score since I feel like The Sims 2 Nightlife was indeed a great expansion pack in the franchise, and I think that Simmers would miss The Sims 2 Nightlife if it was an expansion pack that was missing from their franchise collection. Nightlife was great, but it definitely wasn't perfect, and I would even go and say that it wasn't even nearly perfect either. And had Apartment Life never made it as part of the franchise, then I think that Nightlife wouldn't have felt like an incomplete concept in some ways. Still, Nightlife delivered on some much needed gameplay at the time, being the ability to get your Sims out of the house and just having more fun. I think that The Sims 2 Nightlife came to the franchise at the perfect time, a time where Simmers everywhere needed to give their Sims the freedom to just let loose and have fun. And for that, it was a great experience in my opinion. If you enjoyed this review and my thoughts on The Sims 2 Nightlife, then feel free to like and consider subscribing. Furthermore, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for watching, and that you are more than welcome to share your thoughts and experiences and stories while playing The Sims 2 Nightlife. I'd love to hear them, and you are more than welcome to share those stories in the comment section below. So up next, I'll be reviewing The Sims 2 Open for Business. Now, people that love this expansion pack will stan it. However, I might be a little more on the fence about it than what you might expect. But I will share my thoughts on Open for Business in the next video. Anyways, I just want to thank you again for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day.